Let me start with an uncomfortable truth. Most people chasing money are building a glass house on a busy street. It might look impressive. It might even feel powerful. But it only takes one stone, one lawsuit, one tax bill, one scandal, one policy change, one angry ex for everything to crack. The real elite do not live in glass houses. They may let you see a facade, a carefully staged image, but their true wealth sits somewhere else entirely, layered, defended, hard to touch. They don't just make money. They make money hard to attack. You have been trained to think in terms of income. How much you make per month, how high your salary is, how much revenue your business brings in. That thinking is exactly what keeps you exposed. Income is loud. Income is visible. Income attracts attention. Power, on the other hand, does not care how much you earn if it can be frozen, taxed into oblivion, sued away, or destroyed the moment you become inconvenient. The elite understand this. You need to start understanding it too. When I say attack, I'm not talking only about something dramatic like a raid or a lawsuit, even though those are real threats. An attack can be quiet. A new regulation that targets your industry, a platform ban that kills your main source of customers, a reputational hit that makes your name toxic, a divorce that slices your assets in half, a medical crisis that forces you to liquidate at the worst possible time, an inflation wave that silently eats your savings. The point is simple. If your wealth has no layers, no separation between you and the money, then every shock in your environment hits you directly. Machiavelli warned that the wise do not wait for chaos to arrive before they fortify. The wise man does at once what the fool does at last. Most people only learn about asset protection after they have already been burned. They think about diversification after the market has already collapsed. They consider legal structures after a lawsuit is already on the table. The powerful do the opposite. They structure before they shine. They fortify before they flex. They harden their position before they chase bigger numbers. Dark wealth, in the way we are going to talk about it, is not about crime or evasion. It is about strategic invisibility. It is wealth that exists in the shadows of perception, not because it is illegal, but because it is deliberately boring, quiet, and structurally difficult to target. Machiavelli wrote that men in general judge more by the eye than by the hand, because everyone sees but few touch. The elite take this literally. They let the crowd judge what can be seen, while the real power lies where almost no one can touch. Look at how most people use money. They use it as a signal. The expensive car that sits in their own name, parked outside the house they mortgaged with their full-time salary. The flashy watch, the loud lifestyle on social media. They are telling the world, here is where my money is, here is what I value, here is exactly where to hit me. None of that is accidental. It is a psychological need for validation, dressed up as success. The problem is simple. What you show becomes what others can aim at. Visibility becomes liability. The elite play a completely different game. They might drive something nice, they might live in a good area, but what you see is a fraction, and often not the center of gravity of their wealth. The car might be owned by a company. The house might sit inside a trust. The brand might be in one country, the cash flow in another. They understand that the goal is not to look rich, but to be structurally untouchable. They are willing to appear less impressive in order to be far more secure. That alone is a Machiavellian shift. Here is the mental flip you need to make. Stop thinking of wealth as a number to hit and start thinking of it as a fortress you construct. A fortress has walls, gates, inner courts, escape tunnels. It is designed so that even if one wall is breached, the ruler is not captured. Right now, if you are like most people, your entire financial life is one wall. Your job, your personal brand business, your single location, your local bank. If that wall falls, you fall. That is not power. That is dependency with better clothes. We are going to stay on the side of law. This is important. Machiavelli never said, break every rule. What he actually showed was that power belongs to those who understand reality as it is, not as they are told it should be. Playing the game with intelligence inside the legal frame is more than enough to separate you from the herd. You do not need to hide money in some cartoonish offshore island or commit fraud. You need to think like a strategist, not like a consumer. You need structure, not tricks. Think about the main angles of attack on your wealth. There is the legal angle, taxes, lawsuits, regulations. There is the market angle, crashes, inflation, interest rate shocks. There is the social angle, reputation hits, online mobs, bad press. There is the relational angle, breakups, business partner betrayals, family disputes. Finally, there is the internal angle, your own impulses, addictions, and bad decisions. The elite build a wealth system that does not depend on everything going right. They assume some of these attacks will eventually come, and they build so that when they do, the damage is contained. Take a simple example. Imagine a high-earning professional making a few $100,000 a year in salary, all in one country, all in their own name. On paper, they look successful, but their entire lifestyle depends on one employer, one license, one health status, one legal jurisdiction, one tax system, one scandal in their profession, one injury, one policy change, and everything collapses. Now compare that with someone whose visible income looks modest, but who quietly owns pieces of rental properties through entities, holds cash flow businesses in different sectors, and keeps a chunk of liquidity in more than one banking system. If both face a shock, who is more untouchable? Not the one with the higher income, but the one with the deeper structure. Another example, consider the influencer who builds everything on their name and face. Their income is enormous, but entirely tied to constant relevance and algorithm favor. One controversy, one false accusation, one platform rule change, and their brand turns radioactive. If all their wealth is in their own name and tightly wrapped around that brand, they can be crushed fast. A Machiavellian wealth builder uses the attention while it flows, but routes the cash into assets, entities, and positions that can survive if their name disappears. They separate the performer from the owner. They understand that the crowd loves you today and burns you tomorrow. Machiavelli pointed out that men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance. People may love your content, your products, your personality, but when money is on the line, sentiment disappears. Banks, governments, competitors, even partners will protect their own interests first. This is not cynicism, it is clarity. Once you accept that, you stop expecting the system to protect you and instead begin to architect your own protection. You move from wishful thinking to strategic design. So let us define the two realities you are choosing between. Exposed income is money that is loud, concentrated, and directly tied to your personal identity and local environment. It lives in your name. It depends on one or two main sources. It has few legal buffers and no real geographic diversification. It can be frozen, seized, taxed heavily, or destroyed by events you do not control. Untouchable wealth, on the other hand, is layered. The cash flows come from different arenas. The assets are held in structures bigger than just you as a private individual. Some of it sits in places that do not all react the same way to crisis. Your reputation is an asset, but your survival does not depend on public approval. In the parts ahead, we are going to walk through 19 dark wealth principles that the elite use to build that kind of fortress. You will see why visibility is liability and how to reverse your instinct to show everything you have. You will see how they separate control from ownership, so that what appears vulnerable is not where the real power sits. You will see how they use entities, jurisdictions, and asset mixes to create layers instead of single points of failure. You will see how they weaponize reputation so that attacking them becomes costly for others. You will see how they design contingency and exit routes long before they need them, and how you can begin a 90-day hardening plan for your own life. For now, I want you to sit with one central idea. Your current financial reality is not just about how much you earn. It is about how easy it would be for someone or something to take it away. If that thought makes you uneasy, good. That is the beginning of real power. Discomfort is data. It is your mind recognizing the gap between how exposed you are and how untouchable you want to be. Because in the next part, we are going to begin with the first dark wealth principle the elite quietly live by. A principle so simple and so brutally honest that once you see it, you will never look at flashing wealth the same way again. We are going to dismantle the illusion that visibility equals success and replace it with a Machiavellian rule. What the crowd can see, the crowd can strike. In the first part, you saw the real dividing line between the herd and the elite. The crowd measures success by how impressive their financial glasshouse looks from the street. The elite measure success by how hard it is for anyone to even find the real house, let alone break into it. Now we start turning that from philosophy into strategy. Every dark wealth principle I am going to give you is built on a single core reality. What people can see, they can target. What they cannot see, they cannot easily control. Most men have built a life where every important part of their financial existence is on display in some way. Their job title is on LinkedIn. Their lifestyle is on Instagram. Their address is easy to find. Their assets are in their own name. Their income shows up clearly in one tax jurisdiction. It feels normal. It feels transparent. It is also fragile. Number one, visibility is liability. Read that again in your mind and let it land. Visibility is not neutral. It is not harmless. Visibility creates pressure points. Machiavelli observed that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand because everyone can see and few can feel. When people see signs of your wealth, they do not see the work, the risk, the years of sacrifice behind it. They see potential leverage. They see something they might tax, regulate, extract, copy, attack, or resent. Think about how you have been conditioned. You are told to build a personal brand, show your wins, signal success. There is a place for that, and we will talk later about weaponizing reputation properly. But here is the critical shift. You must learn to separate the performance from the position. The performance is what you show. The position is what you actually own and control. The dark wealth mentality says, show only what you are comfortable losing or having attacked. Never put the center of gravity of your wealth in the spotlight. Ask yourself a few blunt questions. If someone wanted to hurt you financially, how easy would it be to map your life? Could they see where you work, what you drive, where you live, what you own? Could they guess your income range from your lifestyle and your posts? Could they tell which industry you depend on? Could they see which accounts and platforms your business relies on? The more yes you feel, the more naked you actually are in a world where envy, bureaucracy, and chaos are always hunting for targets. This does not mean you vanish, move to a cabin, and never show your face. It means you become intentional about where you are loud and where you are invisible. Most people are loud where they should be quiet, and quiet where they should be loud. They scream their consumption but whisper their strategy. The elite do the opposite. They may be loud in ideas, in value creation, in the narrative they control, but they are quiet in the details of where the money actually sits. That is not paranoia. It is design. Number two, understated surface, fortified core. This principle is one of the most emotionally difficult for men who grew up equating visible lifestyle with self-worth. You have been taught to think, if I am winning, people should see it. You picture the car, the watch, the house, the trips. What you rarely picture is this: the judge, the auditor, the regulator, the opportunist, the bitter relative, the ex-partner, the online mob. All of them respond to signals. The brighter your signal, the more of them you attract. The elite are willing to trade some ego gratification for strategic safety. They intentionally create a gap between what they truly have and what people think they have. They may live well, but they rarely live at the full height their net worth could support. That gap is not just living below your means in the generic personal finance sense. It is a protective buffer. It is room to maneuver. It is the difference between if my income drops, I collapse, and if my income drops, my lifestyle does not have to change much at all. Imagine two men. Both earn the same high income. One stretches everything to match that income. Maximum mortgage, latest car, every expense locked into a visible lifestyle that broadcasts status. The other keeps his visible life at maybe half of what he could afford. He drives well, but not absurdly. His house is comfortable, not ostentatious. His social media presence is controlled. Where did the rest of the money go? Into strengthening the core, reserves, investments, entities, diversification. On the outside, they might look similar. On the inside, one is brittle glass, the other is reinforced concrete. Machiavelli warned that a ruler must avoid being despised or hated, and one of the ways to become hated is to rob his subjects of their property and their honor. When you flash and stretch to impress, you stir both envy and expectation. People feel almost entitled to see you fall. When you are more understated, your wins are harder to resent, and your moves are harder to predict. The elite understands social perception as a threat surface. They dial down the triggers that invite attack and dial up the quiet moves that build strength. This is not about becoming small. It is about not letting your ego drag your fortress into the open. The more your identity depends on others seeing you as successful, the easier it is to trap you, manipulate you, and punish you by threatening that image. If your self-respect comes from your inner standard and your strategic position, then losing some visibility does not scare you. That is a very different kind of man. Number 3, separate your name from your assets. This is where the elite truly begin to step away from the herd. The average man thinks in a straight line, I make money, I put it in my account, I buy things in my name, I own them. It feels simple and honest. It is also the easiest possible structure to attack. Everything important is tied directly to the same legal identity, yours. One lawsuit, one aggressive tax authority, one judgment, and the line from you to your assets is perfectly clear. The elite think in layers, not lines. They understand that control and ownership are not always the same. They use structures that give them control over assets without having everything piled directly into their personal name. That might be companies, partnerships, or other legal entities, depending on where they live. The point is not the technical detail right now. The point is the mindset. Your personal name should not be the single basket holding your entire financial life. Consider a simple example. A man owns a rental property. If he owns it directly in his personal name, every issue with that property can point straight at him. If something goes wrong, they are coming for him as an individual. If, instead, the property is held by a properly structured entity, there is a buffer. There is an extra layer that changes how easily someone can get from problem to your entire net worth is on the table. That does not make you invincible, but it changes the dynamics. It increases the friction for anyone who wants to reach you. Machiavelli wrote that a prudent man should always follow the paths trodden by great men and adapt them to his own situation. Look at families and dynasties that have survived for generations. Their wealth is almost never just in grandpa's checking account, but it sits in structures that outlive any one person. It is not always clear who personally owns what, and even when it is, there are multiple layers between the individual and the asset. That is not an accident. It is how you keep wealth from constantly resetting back to zero every time life hits hard. You might be thinking, but I am not rich enough yet for all of that. That is the mindset that keeps people from ever becoming truly secure. The elite do not wait until they are rich enough to think about structure. They start thinking structurally at every level. Maybe you are not setting up complex systems yet, but you can already shift your mentality. Instead of asking only, how do I earn more? Start asking, how do I make what I earn harder to reach? harder to freeze, harder to destroy. This is the deeper game. You do not need to copy anyone's exact setup. You need to embrace the principle. Your personal name should be less and less the place where everything important lives. Your name can be the conductor. The structures can be the instruments. You direct, but you are not the only container. When life comes swinging, there is more to get through than a single exposed target. So in this part, we have walked from philosophy into the first three dark wealth principles that quietly govern how the elite live. They treat visibility as liability instead of a trophy. They choose an understated surface and a fortified core. They work to separate their name from their assets, building layers instead of a single vulnerable line. You might not implement everything overnight, but if you internalize these principles, you will already start behaving differently. You will post differently, spend differently, structure differently, and this is only the beginning, because the truly untouchable do not stop at separation and understatement. They think in terms of entire ecosystems, multiple income streams, multiple asset classes, multiple locations, multiple narratives. In the next part, we're going to start dissecting how they build those layers in practice and how they design their money so that when one pillar is attacked, the entire structure does not fall. That is where your transformation from exposed income to dark, resilient wealth really accelerates. By now you can feel the pattern. The average man builds a straight line between himself and his money. The elite build a maze. In the last part, you saw how visibility turns into liability, how an understated surface protects a fortified core, and why separating your name from your assets is the first real step toward being untouchable. Now we go deeper into the architecture itself, because if your income streams and legal structures are still single points of failure, you are not untouchable yet. You are just slightly harder to hit. Number 4, multiple pillars, not one throne. Most men are mentally sitting on a single throne. One employer, one main business, one industry, one audience, one country. It feels powerful because as long as that throne is stable, they feel like kings. Until they remember that they did not build the room, they do not own the building, and they definitely do not control who walks in with the power to remove that throne entirely. One firing, one policy change, one algorithm shift, one disruption in their niche. Suddenly, the so-called kingdom vanishes overnight. The elite design their wealth like a hall supported by multiple pillars. If one pillar cracks, the whole does not collapse. This is deeper than the cliché of multiple streams of income. Most people hear that and think it means 10 side hustles, all fragile, all drowning them in stress. That is not what the powerful do. They focus, but they do not depend. They build a core income engine, yes, but they slowly grow supporting pillars that do not all react to the same risks at the same time. Look at the psychology behind this. The average man craves certainty, so he clings to one big source. The elite accept that certainty is an illusion, so they trade the comfort of one huge dependency for the power of several independent supports. One pillar might be an operating business, another might be cash-flowing assets, another might be royalties, licenses, or digital products, another might be lower-yield, high-safety reserves. They are not chasing constant excitement. They are reducing the chance that any single failure kills them. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must lay strong foundations. Otherwise, he will inevitably be destroyed. For him, those foundations were loyal troops and sound laws. For you, in a modern context, those foundations are diversified cash flow and structural resilience. When you only have one throne, your entire identity is hooked into that position. That makes you easy to control. Your boss feels it. The platform feels it. The state feels it. They know you cannot walk away. Dark wealth begins when you start to reclaim the option to walk. Number 5, entities as armor, not decoration. Once you embrace the idea of multiple pillars, you have to think about how those pillars are held. The amateur sets everything up in a way that looks impressive, but offers no true armor. One company in one jurisdiction with one bank, doing 10 different risky activities, all tied directly back to him personally. He will brag at dinners about having a company, but structurally, he has built a paper wall. If it catches fire, the flames go straight through to his personal life. The elite use entities as armor, not as ego trophies. They understand that each activity carries different risks, different contracts, different liabilities. They do not casually mix them. They let certain vehicles take certain hits by design so that others stay protected. The goal is not to create a mess of complexity for its own sake. The goal is to draw clean lines between activities that could expose each other. Think about a simple pattern. One entity holds operating risk, clients, invoices, contracts, day-to-day activity. Another entity holds long-term assets, intellectual property, key trademarks, possibly real estate or major stakes. The operating entity pays for the use of those assets, but does not actually own them. If something goes wrong in the day-to-day operation, the long-term crown jewels are not sitting directly in the blast zone. This is how a setback becomes painful instead of fatal. Machiavelli noted that the vulgar are always taken by appearances, and the world is composed chiefly of the vulgar. Most people care more about the appearance of owning something impressive than about how it is shielded. They want the house in their name, the car in their name, the brand in their name, because it feels like a direct hit of status. The elite accept that appearances are for others. Structure is for survival. They are happy to let an entity own where their ego would like to see their personal name, because they care more about lasting power than about surface-level pride. Now ask yourself, where are you using entities just to feel official? And where are you using them as real armor? Is your current setup just a formality your accountant suggested, or a thought-through part of a bigger strategy? This is where you stop treating structure as paperwork and start treating it as part of the game of power. Your signature on a document is not just ink. It is a connection point between your identity and risk. The fewer direct, unnecessary connections, the harder you are to hit. Number 6. Jurisdictional thinking. Here is where the truly untouchables separate themselves from everyone else. Most men act like the laws, banks, and rules around them are the only reality that exists. They treat their home country like a closed box. Their entire financial life exists under one legal climate, one political climate, one monetary policy. Then they are surprised when that climate changes and everything they built is suddenly at the mercy of decisions they did not make. The elite think in jurisdictions. They understand that the world is not one unified playing field. It is a set of overlapping arenas, each with its own rules, strengths, and weaknesses. Tax laws differ. Asset protection laws differ. Banking cultures differ. Even how quickly a government can freeze or seize assets differs. Untouchable wealth is not just diversified by type of asset, but by where those assets legally live. Now you might be thinking, but I am not in a position yet to move countries or open entities globally. That is not the point, at least not at the beginning. The point is to expand your mental map. Start seeing your local system as one environment among many, not the only possible one. Maybe at first it is simply a second bank in a different region, or a small exposure to assets priced in another currency, or understanding how digital assets sit under a different set of controls and risks. Over time, as your means grow, that mental flexibility gives you options that others never even explore. Machiavelli said, "Whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past, for human events ever resemble those of preceding times. Look at history. Currencies have collapsed, regimes have changed, entire classes of assets have been wiped out in one place and not in another. People who kept everything tied to one jurisdiction lost everything. People who quietly held portions of their wealth in different systems often preserved a foothold from which to rebuild." Jurisdictional thinking is not paranoia. It is simply refusing to let your entire fate rest on one set of politicians, one central bank, one legal code. This does not mean you run from your country or hate your system. It means you stop being naive. You can appreciate what works, while also acknowledging what could one day turn against you. The dark wealth mindset is, I respect the rules of each arena I enter, but I do not marry any of them. I stay portable in my mind first, then in my money. If one environment becomes hostile, I have somewhere else to stand. Put these three principles together. Multiple pillars, not one throne, ensures that your income is not a single yes or no switch controlled by someone else. Entities as armor, not decoration, ensure that when something goes wrong in one activity, everything you have worked for is not dragged into the same fight. Jurisdictional thinking ensures that your entire future does not depend on one political and monetary climate staying kind to you forever. Feel how different that is from the way most people live. Most people are one job, one company, one country away from disaster. They have no redundancy, no buffers, no alternative arenas. They call that normal. They call it being a good citizen. The elite call it exposed. In the next part, we are going to take this skeleton and start putting muscle on it. We will dive into the dark wealth principles that govern asset mix and social cover, how the elite decide what to hold, what to avoid, what to show, and what to bury so deep in their structure that almost no one knows it exists. That is where you start learning not just how to make money, but how to make that money very, very hard to attack. You have started to see how the elite think in layers instead of lines. They avoid the spotlight where their core sits. They separate their personal name from their assets, and they refuse to let one throne decide their fate. But there is a question you should be asking yourself right now. If I am going to build all these layers, what should those layers actually be made of? It's not enough to have structure if the contents inside that structure are still fragile, trendy, and easy to wipe out. Now we move into the dark wealth principles that govern what the elite actually hold. Most people treat their portfolio like a mood ring. When times are good, they chase what is exciting. When times are bad, they panic and sell what was exciting. Underneath all the noise is one consistent pattern. Their asset mix is built around their emotions, not around resilience. That is exactly how the system wants you. Emotional, reactive, predictable. The elite flip this completely. Their asset mix is built on staying in the game when everyone else is being forced off the table. Number 7, base first, bravado later. The average man reverses this. He wants bravado first. He wants the trade he can brag about, the startup that sounds impressive at parties, the risky bet that might 10x. His base is an afterthought. A tiny emergency fund, if that. No real reserves. No quiet, boring assets that hold the line while the world goes crazy. Then he wonders why every shock feels like the end of the world. He is not unlucky. He is underbuilt. The elite are ruthless about the order of operations. Before they chase anything flashy, they make sure there is a base. That base is not there to make them feel rich. It is there to make them hard to kill. It is the cash or liquid equivalents that cover months of living and operating costs. It is the safer, slower assets that are unlikely to go to zero overnight. It is the debt they have cleared that no longer hangs over their head like a sword. Only when this base exists do they allow themselves to reach for higher return, higher risk moves with money they can actually afford to expose. Machiavelli warned that he who builds on the people builds on mud. In your world, that translates like this. If your entire financial life is built on the shifting mood of markets, platforms, or trends, you are building on mud. The base is stone. It is not glamorous. It does not make for viral content, but it is what lets you sleep when everyone else is sweating through their sheets at 3 in the morning. Without that base, every crisis threatens your survival. With that base, crises become opportunities because you are not forced to sell at the worst possible moment just to survive. Number 8, cash flow over flashes. Once the base is in place, the elite turn their attention to one thing above all: streams, not sparks. A spark is a one-time win. A cash flow is a recurring pulse. Most people obsess over sparks. The big trade, the one deal, the sudden pump in their favorite asset. Their identity rides on that hit of adrenaline. The problem with sparks is simple. When they are gone, they are gone. If your life depends on constantly generating new sparks, you are not powerful. You are simply a high-functioning gambler. The powerful, on the other hand, use flashes of opportunity to buy cash flow. They use a big win, not as an excuse to inflate their lifestyle, but as fuel to acquire positions that send them money on a schedule. That could be a piece of a boring business, a rental income stream that is structured intelligently, a license, a subscription product, dividends from solid companies, or something else entirely. The point is not the form. The point is the rhythm. Money that shows up consistently without requiring you to constantly dance for it is fundamentally different from money that depends on you always performing perfectly. Machiavelli spoke often about fortune, fortuna, and virtue, virtu. He said, "Fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to master her, to conquer her by force." In modern terms, relying purely on luck is surrendering to fortune. Turning luck into recurring cash flow is your way of asserting virtue, your capacity to shape events instead of being shaped by them. When you turn a flash of opportunity into a durable stream, you are converting chaos into structure. Compare two paths. One man makes a large speculative gain and uses it to upgrade everything: car, rent, lifestyle, social display. His monthly obligations climb. There is no new income stream attached to that gain. If his momentum slows, he is crushed by the very lifestyle he created to celebrate his win. Another man makes a similar gain and quietly channels it into cash flow assets. His monthly obligations do not explode. His visible life does not radically jump. But beneath the surface, there is a new stream sending him money month after month. One man gains attention. The other gains leverage. Number 9. Uncorrelated layers. Here is where it gets more advanced and much darker, in the best way. Most people think they are diversified because they have many different things inside one single trend. Several tech stocks, several properties in the same city, in the same price bracket, financed in the same way. Several income streams all tied to one platform or one industry. It feels like variety. In reality, it is one story told in different fonts. When that story goes wrong, everything suffers together. The elite think in correlations, not just in categories. They ask, if this part of my world is under attack, does that automatically drag the others down, or do some of them hold steady or even benefit? It is not enough to own different things. Those things need to respond differently to shocks. Some assets may thrive in inflation, others in stability. Some may be sensitive to interest rates, others less so. Some may be tied heavily to your personal brand, others almost completely detached from whether your face is popular this year. Machiavelli advised princes to organize the state in such a way that, no matter what fortune may bring, they will be prepared to resist it. Think of your wealth the same way. If inflation spikes, what happens to you? If your local real estate market tanks, what happens? If your main industry goes into decline, what happens? If your government becomes more aggressive in taxation or regulation, what happens? If your online reputation gets attacked and your audience turns on you, what happens? Uncorrelated layers mean that the answer is not everything falls apart at once. This is where jurisdictional thinking, which we discussed earlier, intersects with asset mix. You might have some exposure to your home market because you understand it well. That is fine, but you complement it with exposures that are not chained to the same fate. Maybe some of your cash flow is online and global. Maybe some of your savings or investments are in instruments that behave differently than your business when the economy shifts. Maybe some of your future upside sits in ventures that would benefit if your current arena becomes crowded or restricted. This is not about being everywhere and owning everything. It is about refusing to let one story write your entire financial destiny. The more your layers move differently, the harder it is for any single crisis to wipe you out. You might take hits, you might lose comfort, but you are still in the game while others are forced to tap out. That is what dark wealth is really about. staying in the game long enough and with enough flexibility that opportunities eventually have no choice but to collide with you. You might be feeling a mix of clarity and discomfort right now. Clarity because you can see how exposed your current setup might be. Discomfort because changing it feels like a big shift in identity and behavior. That is exactly where transformation begins. You are not just rearranging numbers. You are rewriting the story of how you relate to wealth itself. Now, before we go deeper, I want you to lock this into your mind and drop it in the comments. I build wealth that is hard to attack and easy to grow. That sentence is not just a feel-good line. It is a standard. From now on, every financial decision you make can be measured against it. Does this move make my wealth harder to attack or easier to attack? Does it make my wealth easier to grow or more fragile to maintain? If the answer is wrong on either side, you know what to do. Say no or change the structure. In the next part, we're going to shift from the internal architecture of your assets to the external battlefield of perception. Because money does not exist in a vacuum. It lives in a social environment full of eyes, opinions, narratives, and reputations. The elite do not just hide from this. They weaponize it. You will see how they use reputation as both shield and sword, how they create social cover that protects their true position, and how they design a public image that feeds their wealth instead of making it easy to attack. You have started to build an inner structure, multiple pillars of income, entities as armor, jurisdictional thinking, a base that keeps you in the game, and uncorrelated layers that do not all fall together. That is the skeleton. But money does not sit in a vacuum. It lives inside a human battlefield of perception, envy, respect, and narrative. If you ignore that battlefield, you leave your fortress surrounded by angry crowds, hungry officials, and opportunists waiting for an excuse to strike. The elite do not just hide from this. They weaponize it. Most men think of reputation as something soft and emotional. I want people to like me. I care what they think. They treat reputation like a popularity score, so they try to please everyone. That is exactly how you become weak and controllable. When your self-respect depends on approval, anyone who can threaten that approval can control you. The elite respect reputation, but not as a comfort. They treat it as armor and leverage. They know that what people believe about you can either invite attack or make attacking you costly. Number 10. Separate the man from the mask. The average man lives as one blended identity. Who he really is, what he really owns, and how he shows up in public are all fused together. If his name is dragged, his income is dragged, his opportunities are dragged, his entire life is dragged. He has no separation between the man and the mask he wears for the world. It feels authentic. It is also dangerous, because if the mask is ever damaged, the man falls with it. The elite are far more deliberate. They build a mask, a public image, a persona, a role. It might be the expert, the entertainer, the CEO, the charming professional. That mask is real in the sense that it expresses part of them, but it is not the whole of them. More importantly, it is not where their entire wealth lives. The mask can be attacked, criticized, even destroyed in the court of public opinion without automatically dragging the entire structure of their wealth down with it. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." The powerful take that line as a guiding rule. They understand that appearance is a tool, not a confession. They use the mask to attract opportunities, to gain trust, to shape narratives. But behind the mask is a colder calculation. If this persona ever becomes a liability, can I step back, redirect, or even let it die without losing everything? If the answer is no, you are not using a mask. You are chained to it. Ask yourself honestly. If your public image, your job title, or your personal brand were damaged tomorrow, how much of your wealth and opportunity would go with it? If the answer is almost all of it, then you have fused the man and the mask. The dark wealth path requires you to start separating them. Let your persona be a strategic asset, not your only lifeline. Number 11, reputation as shield, not spotlight. Most people use reputation as a spotlight. They want to be recognized, applauded, talked about. They want their name at the center of every room. They think if everyone knows them, they will always have opportunities. There is some truth in that, but there is a cost they ignore. The brighter your spotlight, the more clearly every flaw, misstep, and controversy is visible. The more you attract not just fans, but enemies. Not just customers, but regulators and critics. The elite use reputation as a shield instead. They cultivate a specific kind of reputation that reduces the desire and benefit of attacking them. That might mean being known as fair in business, so anyone trying to smear them looks obviously jealous. It might mean being seen as generous or useful to their community, so those who move against them face social backlash. It might mean being perceived as too connected, too competent, or too legally prepared to be easy prey. The goal is not universal love. The goal is to make an attack on you socially or reputationally expensive. Machiavelli warned rulers to avoid being hated or despised. He did not say, "Make everyone adore you." He understood that fear without hatred is a more stable state than pure love, because love can turn to hatred quickly when people feel betrayed. For you, this translates into a simple question. Does your current public behavior make it easy or hard for people to justify attacking you? If you are arrogant, deceptive, or visibly predatory, you provide them moral fuel. If you are consistently competent, fair, and restrained, those who attack you often expose themselves more than they hurt you. Notice something crucial here. Using reputation as a shield does not mean being weak or people-pleasing. It means being strategically predictable in your integrity and competence, so that narratives against you sound like distortions. It means you do not casually create enemies out of ego. You might be firm, you might say no, you might be hard to manipulate, but you avoid sloppy emotional conflicts that generate needless bitterness. The elite save their energy for real threats, not petty wars. Number 12, social decoys and cover. This is where the game gets darker in a way most people never consider. The average man either hides everything and becomes invisible, or shows everything and becomes a target. The elite understand a third option, decoys. They let certain aspects of their life become the obvious talking points, while the true center of their wealth stays in the background. The decoy can be a public-facing business, a visible brand, even a lifestyle that looks like the main stage, but is actually just the front of house. Machiavelli observed that a prince must learn how not to be good, and to use this knowledge, or not use it, according to necessity. In your world, decoys are an example of this. They are not inherently good or bad. They are tools. A public-facing venture might be highly visible, actively marketed, and often targeted by competitors. Meanwhile, behind it, quieter assets generate a significant portion of the actual wealth. If the public venture is hit, you suffer a blow, but not a fatal wound. The attacker feels victorious, unaware they have aimed at what you were willing to risk. You see this in the way some powerful people handle their image. There is always a clear story for the public to latch onto. A product, a mission, a cause. That story attracts attention, both positive and negative. Behind that story is an entire architecture of entities, assets, and arrangements that are never discussed on talk shows or social media. Those who only judge by the eye believe they know where the wealth sits. Those who understand the game know that if it is being constantly broadcast, it is probably not the whole picture. Ask yourself, if someone tried to map your wealth story right now, would they find only one obvious line? Your job, your business, your brand, your visible home. Or would they run into decoys, partial truths, things that look like the whole story but are only part of it? You do not need to invent fake lives or lie. You simply need to avoid giving a full blueprint to strangers about where your core actually is. Share selectively. Let some parts of your life be loud and others be silent. There is a deeper psychological reason for all of this. Most attacks do not come from people who truly understand you. They come from those who operate off simple, emotionally charged narratives. If you give them a story that satisfies their shallow curiosity, they often stop digging. They think they know you, so they move on. The elite use this to their advantage. They provide enough surface story to occupy the eye, while keeping the hand away from the real levers of power in their world. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not essential, then, that a prince should have all the good qualities which I have enumerated, but it is most essential that he should seem to have them. Translate that into wealth. It is not essential that the public sees every lair, every fortress wall, every contingency. It is essential that what they see serves your position instead of exposing it. The mask you wear, the shield of your reputation, and the decoys you choose are not vanity. They are part of your wealth defense system. By now, you can feel how far this is from the get-rich-quick mindset. This is not about a viral win or a single lucky run. This is about stacking principles that make you harder to read, harder to corner, and harder to break. You are separating the man from the mask. You are shaping reputation into a shield rather than a spotlight. You are using social decoys and cover so that even when you are apparently vulnerable, your real position remains solid. In the next part, we will take this even further into the domain of survival. Because regardless of how well you build, storms will come, policies will change, markets will swing, people will betray you, attacks will happen. The elite do not merely hope that their structure holds. They actively design contingency and exit routes long before they need them, so that when the fire starts, they are not trapped inside the building. That is where we move from being difficult to attack to being almost impossible to corner. Up to this point, you have been building something most men never even realize exists. A layered structure instead of a straight line. A separation between your name and your assets. Jurisdictional thinking. Cash flow that does not all depend on one story. A mask that can take hits without dragging the real man down. Now we enter a colder, sharper territory. What happens when the storm actually hits? Because no matter how well you build, life will still come for you. Most people live as if everything will more or less continue the way it is. Same laws, same job, same platform, same relationships. They might intellectually know that change is possible, but they behave as if it is not imminent. The elite assume the opposite. They behave as if breach is inevitable. Audit, lawsuit, policy shift, smear campaign, platform purge, currency shock, health collapse, betrayal. They do not obsess over these things, but they design as if at least some of them will eventually arrive. That design is what makes them so hard to corner. Number 13, always assume the breach. The average man thinks, if I am honest and I follow the rules, everything will be fine. That is a comforting story. It is also incredibly naive. Many attacks on wealth have nothing to do with whether you are a good person. Markets do not care. Bureaucracies do not care. Witch hunts do not care. Mistakes happen. False accusations happen. Macro events happen. If your entire defense is, I hope nothing goes wrong, you are not an adult in the game of power. You are a child with a big paycheck. The elite internalize a harsher truth. At some point, something will go wrong. A wall will crack. A channel will dry up. A regulator will come knocking. A contract will backfire. They do not see this as paranoia, but as realism. Machiavelli wrote that a wise man ought always to follow the paths beaten by great men, and to imitate those who have been supreme. The great men who actually lasted did not assume permanent peace. They assumed siege, betrayal, and reversal, and they built for it. Assuming the breach does not mean living in fear. It means designing your life so that damage is compartmentalized. If a business is hit, your personal living situation is not automatically on fire. If your name is dragged, your core cash flows do not all evaporate at once. If your main market collapses, there are other positions that remain standing. You stop thinking in terms of, how do I stop anything bad from ever happening? And start thinking in terms of, when something bad happens, how do I make sure it is not fatal? You can start small. Ask blunt questions. If my social media disappeared tomorrow, what remains? If my employer vanished or decided I was no longer useful, how long could I operate at my current standard before panic sets in? If my home country implemented much harsher taxes or capital controls, do I have any flexibility at all? If I were hit with an unexpected legal or medical expense, would I be forced to liquidate the very assets that were supposed to make me free? These questions sting, but they force you to see where a breach would currently flood your entire system. Number 14. Exit before you are forced. The weak always wait too long to move. They stay in a job until they are fired. They stay on a platform until it bans them or throttles them into irrelevance. They stay in a business model long after the margins have been silently murdered. They cling to a city, a tax environment, or a partnership until it is openly hostile. Then they scramble, humiliated, reacting from a position of zero leverage. They did not leave because it was still comfortable. Once it became intolerable, it was also too late. The elite treat exits as strategic maneuvers, not emotional breakdowns. They leave before they are pushed. They sense when an environment is shifting from demanding but useful to dangerous and one-sided, and they act while they still have options. Machiavelli observed that injuries must be inflicted all at once, so that being tasted less, they offend less. Systems do this to you. They tighten rules slowly, then hit hard. If you are paying attention, you see the pattern forming before the final blow. Think of every environment you depend on as a room. Your job is one room. Your main platform is another. Your primary market is another. A relationship that intertwines with your money is another. The average man only looks at whether the room is still tolerable today. The elite constantly look for two things: the trend of the room and the exits. Are the rules trending in your favor or against you? Are you becoming more free or more dependent? If things turn quickly, how many doors could you walk through and how fast? Exit routes exist at multiple levels. There is the skill level exit. If your current skill set or license was no longer usable in its current form, do you have related skills you can pivot to without starting from zero? There is the infrastructure level exit. If your current payment processor, bank or platform cut you off, do you already have alternatives set up? Or do you have to fill out forms for the first time while you are under pressure? There is the geographic level exit. If your country became aggressively hostile to your financial reality, have you laid any groundwork at all for a different base, even if only partial? Machiavelli wrote that men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived. The man with no exit routes deceives himself. He tells himself that because today is fine, tomorrow will be similar. He ignores the necessity of building options while things are calm. The man with dark wealth principles does the opposite. When times are relatively good, he quietly builds the next bridge, so that if this one starts to crumble, he walks away instead of falling. Number 15. Redundancy is power, not waste. Most people hate redundancy. They see a second account, a second channel, a second supplier, a second legal opinion, a second base of operations as unnecessary complications. Why bother? This one works. They are addicted to streamlined convenience. Everything is centralized. Everything is efficient. Everything runs through one or two critical points. It feels clean and simple until one of those points snaps and simplicity turns into complete paralysis. The elite are willing to carry what looks like waste in peacetime because they know it turns into power in crisis. Redundancy is not excess. It is spare capacity. It is the backup generator when the grid fails. It is the second engine on a plane when the first one dies. Could you fly with one engine? Yes. Would you want to cross an ocean that way? No, yet most men are doing exactly that with their money and their life. One engine, one system, one contingency plan, usually in their head, never tested. Redundancy can be financial, practical, and even social. Financial redundancy is liquidity that you do not immediately put at risk just to chase yield, because its job is to be ready when the unexpected hits. Practical redundancy is having more than one way to accept payment, to reach your audience, to communicate with clients, to move your money, to host your important data. Social redundancy is not tying your entire future to one mentor, one employer, one partner, one gatekeeper. If any of them turn against you, you are not stuck begging for mercy. Machiavelli's warning about relying on mercenaries applies here in a modern form. He argued that mercenary troops are disunited, ambitious, without discipline, unfaithful, and that a prince relying solely on them stands disunited and in danger. Translate that into your world. If all your power is rented from external systems and you have no redundant ways to operate when they fail you, you are in danger. Redundancy is how you slowly replace mercenary dependence with your own lasting strength. Look at your current reality through this lens. Where are you one failure away from being stuck? One employer, one key client, one ad account, one fulfillment method, one legal structure that, if compromised, drags everything with it. Redundancy costs something on the front end, a little more time, a little more money, a little more mental load. But the cost of not having redundancy when the breach comes is often everything. The elite silently pay the smaller cost now to avoid paying the full price later. What you are building with these three principles is not paranoia. It is calm readiness, assuming the breach makes you honest about your weak points. Exiting before you are forced keeps your moves voluntary instead of desperate. Treating redundancy as power gives you the ability to act under pressure instead of freeze. Together, they turn you from a man who must pray, nothing goes wrong, into a man who expects things to go wrong and is still hard to take down. In the next part, we are going to shift from the high-level architecture to something brutally practical, how you start hardening your position in a defined time frame. Not a fantasy someday plan, but a structured 90-day push that begins removing the most obvious points of exposure from your life. You will see how to prioritize what to tackle first and how to move from theory to action so that 3 months from now you are measurably less attackable than you are today. That is where dark wealth stops being an idea and becomes your new default way of living. So far, you have been learning how the elite think. Layers instead of lines, masks instead of naked exposure, redundancy instead of naive trust, exit routes instead of blind loyalty. That mental shift is huge, but it is not enough. At some point, theory has to become muscle. You do not become untouchable by understanding these principles in your head. You become untouchable by running them through your life step by step until your entire financial reality is harder to attack than the man you used to be. That is what a 90-day hardening plan is for. Most men will never do this. They will hear ideas like jurisdictional thinking and redundancy and nod with interest, then go back to the same exposed patterns. Why? Because as long as life seems fine on the surface, there is no urgency to change. They only move when they are already under attack, which is exactly when their options are the weakest. You are going to do the opposite. You are going to act while you still have room to breathe. Number 16, 90 days of ruthless clarity. The first thing you need is not another clever move. You need a brutally honest map. You cannot protect what you have never actually faced. Right now, your financial life probably exists as fragments in your head. A rough sense of your income, a vague idea of your bills, a fuzzy awareness of your debts, a half-remembered list of subscriptions, accounts, and obligations. That vagueness is the enemy. You cannot build dark wealth on fog. For the first 30 days of this hardening phase, your main job is to see. Not to impress, not to perform, just to see. You list, privately and clearly, where your money comes from, where it goes, what is in your name, what is in any entity, where your savings and investments are, who has claims on you, who you owe, who can cut you off, and what platforms your income depends on. You do not need a fancy system at the beginning. You need the courage to write down reality without flinching. Machiavelli warned that the disease, when recognized in the beginning, can be easily cured. But when, for lack of recognition, it has grown, it becomes incurable. Your current vulnerabilities are exactly like that. a dependence on one employer, a single bank account, high-interest personal debt, a lifestyle that requires every paycheck. These are early-stage diseases. When you see them clearly, you can cut them out. When you avoid looking, they grow until they own you. This first month is not glamorous. It will not feel like making money. It will feel like pulling your financial life out of the shadows and laying it on the table. Income, expenses, debts, assets, obligations, contracts. You will probably feel moments of shame or anger at yourself. Good. That means you are finally seeing the truth. The man chasing untouchable wealth cannot afford comforting illusions. He needs a map, even if it hurts his ego. Number 17. Remove obvious stupidity first. Once the map is in front of you, the next step is not exotic. It is not opening something offshore or building a complex structure while you are still bleeding from a dozen open wounds. The next step is to stop doing the clearly self-destructive things that make you easy prey. For the second 30-day block, you focus on cleaning up the obvious. Ask yourself direct questions. Am I paying high-interest consumer debt so I can maintain a lifestyle that signals success to people who do not care if I get crushed? Am I mixing personal and business money in ways that make it impossible to see what is really happening and easy for others to attack me? Have I put everything important into one bank, one platform, one ad account, one client? Do I overshare online, broadcasting my income, location, and assets to strangers who may someday weaponize that information? This is where you start closing doors. You aggressively pay down the most toxic debts, or at least stop feeding them with new spending. You separate business and personal accounts, so risk stops leaking across that line. You stop announcing every win publicly. You end obviously bad arrangements, like co-signing irresponsible people's obligations or being the only guarantor for things you do not fully control. You may not be able to fix everything in 30 days, but you can stop making it worse and begin pushing the trend in your favor. Machiavelli wrote, "There is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others." In your life, there is no avoiding confrontation with your own foolishness. You can delay the moment you face it, but every month you postpone, the advantage shifts further to your creditors, your dependencies, your enemies, and your weaknesses. The elite are not perfect. They simply act earlier. They cut stupidity before it matures into catastrophe. Do not underestimate how powerful it is just to plug the most obvious leaks. Less money bleeding out to pointless debt. Less information handed out to strangers. Less entanglement between your personal identity and every risky activity. These are not sophisticated moves, but they change the slope of your life. You go from sliding toward fragility to climbing toward strength. And as those leaks close, you free up energy, focus, and cash you can redeploy. Number 18, automate your defenses. The third month is where you stop relying on willpower and start building systems that protect you even when you are distracted. Busy or tired, most men live on pure intention. I'm going to save more. I'll invest consistently. I'll stop spending on stupid things. Then life hits and those intentions evaporate. Whatever is easiest in the moment wins. The elite do not trust their future selves blindly. They set defaults now that force their future selves to behave. Automation is not just about technology. It is about constructing your environment so that the safe choice becomes the path of least resistance. Automatic transfers into reserves or investment vehicles that happen whether you feel like it or not. Calendar reminders for quarterly reviews of your structures, not just your income. Standing instructions that a certain percentage of any windfall never touches your lifestyle and goes directly into fortress building. Machiavelli said, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." You are both ruler and subject in your own life. Your present self must command your future self with systems, not just advice. If every month you have to negotiate with yourself about whether to fund your safety or your ego, you will eventually lose that negotiation. If the money moves automatically, you have to actively sabotage yourself to break the system. That friction alone will save you. In this third month, you also create simple rules you can remember under pressure. For example, never increase lifestyle just because income went up once. Never rely on a single point of failure for anything that could destroy you if it disappeared. Never publicly flaunt an asset that you cannot afford to have politically, socially, or legally targeted. These rules are not meant to be perfect. They are meant to be anchors. In chaotic moments, they keep you from doing something fatally stupid. Number 19, guard the blueprint. The final principle of dark wealth is about silence. Not silence as in weakness, but silence as in security. Once you begin building this structure, you will feel a temptation to talk about it, to brag about your new moves, to explain your clever setup, to confide every detail to people who seem impressed or curious. That impulse is natural. It is also dangerous. The more people understand your blueprint, the easier it becomes for someone, someday, to attack exactly the parts you thought were safest. Machiavelli reminded rulers that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Guarding your blueprint is fox behavior. You recognize that information itself can be a trap. You share only what is necessary with those who must know. With everyone else, you are pleasant, you are social, you can even be generous, but you are vague about structure. You do not give away your map in exchange for validation. This does not mean living in paranoia or lying about everything. It means understanding that privacy is an asset. The fewer people who know the full layout of your financial fortress, the fewer people can leak, betray, or accidentally expose it. Even with those you trust, you can compartmentalize. Some know about one part of your world. Others know about another. Almost no one sees the entire picture. You keep that in your own mind and, when necessary, with a minimal circle of professional advisors bound by law and aligned incentives. Put this 90-day frame together and you have a clear progression. First 30 days, ruthless clarity. You draw the map and face your vulnerabilities. Second 30 days, removal of obvious stupidity. You close leaks and untangle the most glaring exposures. Third 30 days, automated defenses and guarded blueprints. You hardwire better behavior into your systems and stop giving the world a free look at your structure. You will not become fully untouchable in 90 days, but in 90 days, you can become a completely different kind of man. A man who knows his position instead of guessing. A man who has started separating his name from his assets. A man who has stopped broadcasting targets and started building quiet strength. A man whose future self will look back and recognize this period as the turning point between living in a glass house and moving into a fortress. In the next part, we are going to move beyond tactics and into identity, because these 19 dark wealth principles are not just a checklist. They are a way of being. You are not trying to memorize strategies for a season. You are becoming the kind of man whose default is layered, strategic, and hard to corner. The kind of man who does not just make money, but makes it almost impossible for the world to take it from him. That final shift is where everything you have learned so far locks into place. Up to now, you have been stacking strategies, 19 dark wealth principles that shift you from being rich and exposed to being quietly powerful and hard to corner. But there is one final layer that matters more than any structure, entity, or asset mix. The kind of man you choose to become. Because all the strategy in the world collapses if your identity stays soft, impulsive, and addicted to validation. Untouchable wealth is not just a system, it is a personality upgrade. Most men want the results of dark wealth without the internal transformation. They want the fortress, but not the discipline that builds it. They want to be above attack while still living for applause. They want to talk like Machiavelli while thinking like a teenager. That disconnect is why they never actually implement what they learn. They flirt with power but stay married to weakness. If you want to be different, you have to break that pattern at the root. Think about everything you have heard so far as a mirror. On one side is the exposed man, the glasshouse man. His money is loud. His dependencies are obvious. His entire life is 1 or 2 points of failure. His identity is fused with his job title, his brand, his feed. If that goes, he goes. He overshares, overspends, overestimates how safe he is, and underestimates how quickly things can turn. His strategy is hope. His defense is denial. On the other side is the untouchable man. His wealth is layered. His name and his assets are separated. His income rests on pillars, not a single throne. His reputation is a shield, not a spotlight. He expects breaches, so he builds compartments. He has exits before he needs them. He carries redundancy that looks unnecessary to the naive, but becomes power when chaos hits. He measures moves not by how impressive they look this month, but by how hard they are to attack 10 years from now. What stands between those two men is not talent or luck. It is will. It is the decision to stop living as if the world will reward you just for being a good guy, and to start living as if the world is what it has always been, a place where power protects and naivety pays a price. Machiavelli wrote, "Whosoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times." The times you live in are more exposed, more surveilled, more emotionally reactive than almost any era before. That means your conduct must become more strategic than the average man can even understand. There is a quiet ruthlessness required here, and it is not about hurting other people. It is about refusing to keep hurting yourself. Refusing to keep feeding systems that can crush you while you tell yourself you are doing the right thing. Refusing to keep giving strangers an accurate map of everything you own just so they will click like. Refusing to let politicians, algorithms, employers, and mobs be the only ones with leverage in your life. That refusal is the birth of a darker, calmer, more sovereign version of you. Ask yourself honestly who you have been serving so far with your financial behavior. Have you been serving your ego, chasing signals that make you look successful to people who will vanish the moment you struggle? Have you been serving your fear, staying in arrangements you know are dangerous because leaving would make you uncomfortable? Or have you been serving the man you want to be 10 years from now, the man who can look back and say, "I built something no storm could wipe," out in a single hit? The true Machiavellian twist is this: when you build dark, layered, hard-to-attack wealth, you actually become freer to be generous, relaxed, and present. The exposed man has to cling, manipulate, or perform because he is always one shock away from disaster. The untouchable man can walk away from bad deals, toxic people, and hostile environments because he is not financially chained to any single one of them. He does not have to pretend to like what he secretly fears. He is not forced to smile for systems that would turn on him in a heartbeat. His kindness, when he gives it, is a choice, not a survival tactic. Machiavelli said, "Never was anything great achieved without danger." But that applies here in a specific way. The danger you have to face is not a dramatic, cinematic risk. It is the danger of honesty, the danger of changing how you live, even when people around you will not understand, the danger of dialing down your visible lifestyle to strengthen your core and watching shallow minds misjudge you, the danger of disturbing your own comfort so that your future is less dependent on luck. Most men never embrace that danger. They live in a polished cage and call it security. You are not going to become untouchable in a week, but you can become a different trajectory of man today. A man who no longer makes big money, moves without asking, "Does this make me more attackable or less?" A man who no longer chases every shiny opportunity without asking, "How does this fit into the fortress I am building?" A man who does not confuse public noise with real power, who knows that the quiet, boring parts of his structure are exactly what make him dangerous to anyone who thought they could break him. Imagine yourself a few years from now, if you truly live these 19 principles. Your income comes from several pillars that do not all rise and fall together. Your core assets are held in structures, not just your personal name. Your cash flow is steady enough that you do not have to panic when markets swing. Your reserves mean job loss, platform issues, or economic downturns are painful, but not fatal. Your public image is useful, but not your only lifeline. Your relationships and obligations are cleaner, your debts are controlled or eliminated, your options are open. That version of you behaves differently in every room he walks into. People feel it without knowing why. They sense that you are not easily pressured. You are not rattled by temporary storms. You are not over-eager to impress. You can say no without shaking, because saying no does not threaten your survival. That is what real power looks like in modern life. Not just louder opinions or bigger toys, but the ability to move through the world without being easily cornered. Machiavelli offered this final clue. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. In your case, the first method for estimating the intelligence of your future self is to look at the structures you build around your money. Do you surround it with dependencies, single points of failure, and public exposure? Or do you surround it with layers, compartments, and options? That is your real IQ score in the game of wealth. Not your test results, not your crypto picks, your architecture. So here is your choice, laid bare. You can keep playing the exposed game, big signals, fragile core, one throne, one story, one bad month away from everything unraveling. Or you can walk the darker path, quieter signals, fortified core, multiple pillars, layered structures, and a 90-day push that becomes a lifetime habit of staying hard to hit. One path wins applause while you are lucky and destroys you when you are not. The other path might confuse people in the short term, but over time, it gives you something far more valuable than applause: control. If you decide to take this seriously, you do not need to announce it. You do not need to post about it. You simply begin. You map your position. You remove obvious stupidity. You build your base. You separate your name from your assets. You stop letting your ego make structural decisions. You create redundancy. You prepare exits. You guard your blueprint. And day by day, month by month, you become less like the man who can be broken by a single letter in the mail or a single policy change, and more like the man whose wealth and life are built to survive. You are not promised a calm world. You are not promised fair treatment. You are not promised that systems will always play nice with you. But you are given this: the ability to think like a strategist instead of a spectator. The ability to build like a prince instead of a peasant. The ability to choose dark wealth over loud, fragile success. Take that seriously, and the next time the world looks for an easy target, it will pass you by and settle on someone else. Because you will have become exactly what the title promised: a man who does not just make money, but makes it very, very hard to attack.